Resume. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, once again. Like I said, and I mentioned in the last class, we'll be starting with the new chapter called the circulatory system. It's from the unit of human anatomy and physiology. As always, I have kept the content that is present in the syllabus, and it is mentioned here. I will not go into this because anyway, we are going to look through each and every point which is mentioned here. So as and when we go forward, I will keep coming back if at all it is required. So one of the most important part before we study the circulatory system is to understand what the body fluids are. Then in that case, obviously, commonly what you know of is the blood and the fluids in the tissue, but there are more than that. There are quite a lot of fluids which are present in our body. So like I said, commonly we know blood, but otherwise lymph, milk, saliva, which are produced in the body, and then they are either circulated within the body, like for example blood or lymph, or they are secreted outside it, for example like milk or even saliva or sweat. So these are all different types of body fluid that you would know of. Now, simplistically, we already know blood like it's contained in the heart, or it is present in the heart, or pumped by the heart, and it is present in the blood vessels. These will include your arteries, veins, and capillaries. This will be like kind of quick revision that whatever you know already is present here. And lymph is a part of the lymphatic system, and it is flowing through the lymphatic vessels as well as through the lymphatic organ, for example like tonsil, spleen, thymus, and so on. And then the third and the one of the most important body fluid, which is non-circulating as such, is your tissue fluid. And the reason why I say non-circulating is because it is not having any like a proper circulation system. It just moves in and out of the cell, and it moves through the extracellular space, that is in between the cells. Whatever space is present, it keeps moving through that. Now these body fluids we can differentiate into like three different categories, mainly intracellular, extracellular, and like transcellular. So intracellular is within the cell, which is mostly water, ions, and molecules. Extracellular, again, it will have certain amount of water, but majorly it is of cations and anions. Now if you remember some of the polarization or hyperpolarization, that is excitation and like similar phenomena of the cells, which happens in the neurons, which equally happens in the other type of cells or even in the muscle fibers, that will be present in the extracellular like fluids. And the transcellular fluid, these are the electrolytes. Now transcellular, it literally means it keeps fluctuating between spaces, right? So that is the electrolyte, which will ultimately be part of either extracellular or intracellular fluid. And these also include your sodium bicarbonate, sorry, sodium, then bicarbonate or chloride ions. So these are the different electrolytes. Again, we need not go into these many details here. What you need to know is there are different kinds of body fluid that are present inside our body, and which some of them they can take part in the circulation, and some of them they don't take part in the circulation. Now what is the need in general for the transport? Why at all that the whole of the circulatory system has to be present within the body? Again, these basic facts we already know. Like whenever there is a food getting ingested in the body, or whenever we are eating food within like within our digestive system, it gets digested, and then whatever required nutrients are there, they are absorbed, and then they are transported to every body cell like through the blood. Then respiratory, that is the exchange of gases that happens within the lungs, that has to be transported throughout all the body cells, and then that gets like carried away. So like oxygen is exchanged, oxygen is given to the cell, carbon dioxide is taken away, which is what we exhale out later. Then excretory system, one of the very important phenomena of the body, keeping the homeostasis or balance of the body, or what we call as metabolic balance of the body, is to remove the excess of the salts or remove excess of the nitrogenous waste from different body parts. Now this is something like each cell undergoes a process of metabolism, each and every cell. Now, whatever is required by the cell will be taken up, will be utilized for synthesis of proteins, carbohydrate, fats, and so on. And whatever is not required, that will be excreted out of the cell. And then that comes ultimately into the blood system. From the blood, it gets filtered out into the urine, and from urine, it goes out of the body. So that is the whole mechanism of the excretory system. Hormones. Now, certain hormones which are endocrine in nature, that means they are secreted within the blood system, they are secreted and then they are carried using the blood to the targeted organ to show certain action. So, for example, we all know the oxytocin, that is one of the hormone present in the females, that is secreted by your pituitary gland, that is posterior pituitary gland, and that will be carried through the blood. It will act on the uterus, and then whatever action it is supposed to do, it will do. Like for example, labor pain, that is during the childbirth, the uterine contractions are caused by the oxytocin. So something like that, secretion happens at one place, the target action happens at some other place, and that is made possible due to the transport system or due to the circulatory system. And the last one of the important point why the circulatory system or the transport should exist within the body is destruction of the pathogen, because obviously we have immune cells within the blood system, and it creates a chain of event that will ultimately kill the pathogenic bacteria or viruses, and that way it keeps the immunity or keeps the person away from any infection. So that is the need for transport. So there are 5 main points related to digestive system, respiratory system, excretory system, endocrine system, that is hormonal actions, and the immunity of the body. So these are the 5 main points why there is a need for transport. Now, if we have to define circulation, it is just the movement of blood through the vessels, or you can say through the blood vessels of the body, that will carry the nutrients and gases along with it and removes the excretory waste from different parts of the body. So it will take all the blood with nutrient and gases to the cells, bring back all the excretory waste, and then it will remove it from the body. So that is the general purpose and the definition of the circulation. I guess I'm kind of rushing through these, but I assume that you would already know these points. If at all you feel like there is something to be discussed, please stop me. Whenever the actual topic comes, I will go a little slow there. So like for example here, now again, there are 2 different types of circulatory system that exist in the living organisms. Not living organisms, specifically the animals category, which is called as closed circulatory system and open circulatory system. Closed circulatory system is something that uses blood vessels. So that means that they are end to end always closed, and they don't have any opening as such. While in the open circulatory system, the blood circulates through the open body cavities or the spaces which are within the body. Like for example, mollusk is nothing but all your snail kind of organisms. Arthropods, again, like for example, you can take all the insects as well in that category, right? So like they all have this open circulatory system. For example, like you take any insect like cockroach and so on, Right? They don't have blood vessels in it. They have open compartments through which the blood keeps flowing within them. So for example, like one of the open circulatory system is shown here. What they have is just empty spaces within the body cavities, and they have a tubular heart. Tubular heart is nothing but a tube-like structure which is a little enlarged, and then one contracts and the other one relax so that it gets filled in. And once it gets filled in, it will contract and it will push the blood, and the other one will relax so that then it brings the blood back to that tubular region. It's simply called as tubular heart. It's nothing but, yeah, like you must have seen that a big like a stick like balloon, right? A long elongated balloon, and when you press at one point, the air gets pushed up in the other direction. So it's something like that. That is the tubular heart present in this insect category of the organism. And you can actually see this tubular heart looks like this. So there will be one end which will allow the blood to flow through the different body cavities, and then from the other like end, from the body cavity itself, the blood will again enter into the heart. So they don't have really complicated heart structure like how we have in case of human or even in case of mammals. This okay, I will come back to this hemolymph and other part later. And what is shown here is again a type of closed circulatory system, which means there is a heart and then it is always in a closed system. It's like a circuit, right? And which is always enclosed space. Here, after this like pores, it opens or ends up into the body cavities. Here there is nothing like that, so it will always open up into the sorry, it will always be closed within the circulatory system. Sorry. And like again, this particular organism, that is one of the vertebrate species that is being shown here, is having a kind of auxiliary heart. That means they have many not many hearts as such, but they have many tubular structure which pumps the blood, and that is what is called as auxiliary heart. And then there are these closed blood vessel like structures, and that will carry the blood throughout the different body parts. Now, this white portion is not showing any vessels, does not mean the blood doesn't go there. It's just the opened up area of this particular organism that is being shown here. So that is the open and closed circulatory system. Main point that you need to remember here is open circulatory system opens up into body cavities or allows the blood circulation to flow through open body cavities or empty spaces within the body, and then it is again getting pumped back through the heart-like structure. It is not a complete heart structure like how we have it, but it is a heart-like structure. And a closed circulatory system has a proper heart and blood vessels which are in enclosed space, and there is no exchange of this space with anything else. So that is the two types of circulatory system. Does anyone have any questions so far?
So
Yes.
I had a question. So I just wanted to clarify. So in open circular system, there is flow through the open spaces. Is that because there is an absence of blood vessels, or it's just there but they flow from open spaces? It's like
they don't have blood vessels as such. Whatever they have is a small vessels which will just transport into different body compartments. So only this much.
So there is an absence of blood vessels. That's why they circulate through open spaces.
Correct. But like miss, I don't know if we can call this as blood vessels. They are like blood vessels only, because they will have to, it's like, we have one main pipe, and from that main pipe we have sub channels, and then they open up into separate compartments. So it's something like that. The arrangement is something like that. But the major point is they are opening into the open space, that is empty space, And that is why they are called as open circulatory system. In a way, they do have blood vessels, but they are not in a closed circuit.
Okay.
Okay, so that is the closed and open circulatory system. Now, just to introduce you with the different body fluids that are present apart from what we have seen earlier. So there is, of course, tears, which is secreted from the lacrimal gland. Lacrimal gland is present at the corner of your eye, like especially on the outer side, on the top of the eye structure, on the corner, that is where the lacrimal gland is located, and it keeps secreting tear. That is based on stimulation of the lacrimal gland, it will secrete the tear. Then saliva, again, this is, I assume you would know, it's secreted by the salivary gland. Salivary gland is located at the base of your, what you say, mouth structure, or at the end of the jaws. So that is where salivary glands are located. Breast milk, again, they are secreted by the mammary glands or the breast structure in the female. That is again another type of body fluid. Bile, which is secreted by the liver, which helps in the digestion process. Semen, it is secreted by the testis in male, and that is a sexual gland. Then mucus, most of the body tissues, like for example,
Are you gonna
nose.
keep on listing them?
Sorry.
Are you gonna, how many of them are there, as so to speak? Because there are too many. Like at least from what you were showing, there appear to be quite a lot of non-circulating bodily fluids.
Yes.
Do we have to learn about all of them?
No, but then there have been match the pair kind of questions they have been asked. Uh, okay, just give me a minute. I need to close the door. Yeah, sorry. So there are only these many that you need to know, aware of. And the reason being, because I have found them in quite a few questions in either match the pair or fill in the blanks type of question. That's why I thought I should include them here. And yes, you need to know these ones. But out of these, you already know quite many. It just few new. I guess amniotic fluid would be new to you. Bile might be new to you. I'm not too sure. But rest everything you know. So that is not much to remember as such. So mucus, like I said, nose, or even the esophagus, or the vaginal tract in the female, or anus. What else is there? Yeah, so all these tubular parts within our body, they usually have some sort of mucus. The composition will vary of the mucus, but they will all have mucus present in them, and the purpose is simply either to filter the air or for easier sliding of the food through esophagus and so on. So that way this mucus helps in like doing certain function. Amniotic fluid, this is a kind of nourishing fluid which is present around the baby when the baby is, or when the fetus is growing in the uterus of the mother. So that is the amniotic fluid. It is present in the cavity which is called as amniotic cavity. Uterus is the outermost pouch. Within that there will be chorion. Within chorion there will be amniotic cavity, and it will be filled with amniotic fluid, which is nothing but just outside the baby there will be this amniotic fluid being present. And the gastric juice, which is located in the stomach, produced and secreted in the stomach itself. So these are the few non-circulating body fluids which are also present in our body. Now, okay, before I go forward, any question here? Anyone? You just need to remember here the source and what do they secrete. There is nothing additional information as such. Okay, so then coming to one of the most important component of our circulatory system, that is the blood. Again, this part you might have studied earlier already, but in general, blood is made up of four different components. One is a liquid component, that is plasma, and the cell component, that is your RBC, WBC, and platelets. Now, plasma is the like kind of liquid which is present, and it contains lot of water, almost 90% of the water, and out of total composition of the blood, it makes up to almost 55%, right? So whatever that liquid portion is there within the blood, that is plasma, and it is comprising of 55% of the blood, and which contains almost 90% of water, 8% of proteins, and so on, and rest 2% are those all the excretory waste or the ions and so on. So that is how the composition of blood is. Albumin is one of the major protein in the plasma, that we call it serum albumin, because serum is again similar to plasma, just a little difference. But that albumin is which is one of the protein which is present in the plasma. And then there are of course these immunoglobulins, which are nothing but the immune cells. They secrete certain proteins for the taking care of the body fluids from different pathogens. So they are called as immunoglobulins and clotting factors. Clotting factors, they are very, very important again for the clotting of the blood. So whenever you have injury, these clotting factors will allow the clotting of the blood. So I guess usual clotting time is 52 seconds or something, or 42 seconds. So within that much time, the blood has to clot, and that these clotting factors, they are important for making that blood to clot. So that is the composition of plasma. Again, if you want to go into much detail, you can go into the percentage of what is sodium percentage, calcium percentage, and so on. But that it's not the scope of the syllabus. Here, we just need to know the basics of what plasma is composed of. Then RBCs, we are going to look at the RBCs in much more detail later. But here, just to give you a brief idea, if the 40% of the blood contains the RBC, rather the statement might be little twisted here. RBCs, they compose uh, they compose almost 70%, not 70, 40% of the blood that is having RBCs.
So,
Yes.
so just a question, plasma. So, when we get a cut, what comes out is plasma, or that's plasma, right? Or that's blood.
No, that's blood. That's a complete blood.
So then,
But these
so
cells may not come out much, though they will be present at the surface. If the cut is deeper, then obviously you will have all these cells also coming out. If the cut is just a very minor cut, then it is mostly plasma with some RBCs. And of course WBCs are also there, and the platelets are also there, but they don't really come out because they perform the function of, so WBCs will try to stop all the bacteria at that place, and the platelet will try to clot the blood. Okay, so that way the RBCs, they are making I guess it's Aditya, can you,
Oh, sorry about
yeah,
that.
can you please mute? Thank you. So, RBCs, yeah, the one of the major component of the RBC, as you already know, is hemoglobin. Uh, and that is what will give the red color to the blood. It's iron containing protein, that is Fe, the molecular or the elemental notation. and that because of that it gives red color to the blood. So if it is like blood minus RBCs, that is usually a kind of colorless or pale yellowish in color. So that is how the RBCs, they actually give red color to the blood. Then WBCs, the white blood cells, they are very few in number compared to RBCs. Like RBCs, they almost contains 40% of the blood. The WBCs, they are not that much in number, they are very few. And the WBC to RBC ratio is 1:600. That means one WBC will have almost equivalent of 600 WBCs in number. Yeah, so those many are present within the blood. And again, this is approximate ratio. This is not like exact ratio, that if there are like, let's say 100 WBCs, then there will be what, 60,000 RBCs. That is not the exact amount. It will be roughly around that ratio. They mainly protect the body against infection, and this again we will see what are those different WBC cells or white blood cells present in the body which performs a specific type of function. So that is the major function of RBCs. Many of the WBCs, they cross the walls of the vessels and penetrate other tissue. We will also have a look at this particular process, like pedesis it is called as. We will talk about it when we go in little detail about the WBC part. And the platelets, these are very few in number than RBCs, and the platelets, they help in the clotting of the blood at the site of the wound or injury. Now why do they do so? Because they have a proteins called fibrinogen and fibrin, which are kind of insoluble in blood. uh, Not all, like fibrinogen is soluble, and when it converts into fibrin, it becomes insoluble, and that is what becomes like a clot, and that way it stops the bleeding. Again, this mechanism also we will see in much detail later. So these are the main components in brief of the blood, that is plasma, RBC, WBC, and platelets. Now going to one of these component, that is red blood cells, into little more detail. So erythrocytes, they are also called as erythrocytes, the RBCs. These are anucleated, that means they do not have any nucleus, and they are biconcave cells. You already know probably from physics what concave shape is. So on both sides, when there is a biconcave shape, that will be the shape of these erythrocytes, and they are filled with hemoglobin. Now let me ask you a question here. If they are anucleate, how do they function? If they don't have any nucleus, how do they function? Can someone try to answer this?
Yeah, just like bacterial cells.
A little louder, Aditya.
Even bacterial cells don't have a nucleus, but even they can function. So I guess the same mechanism is required for these cells as well.
But bacterial cell, they have a lot of genetic material, a lot as in they have uh, like proper, or they can at least invade the host cells, and they can multiply, and they can do all the other things. That is not the case with RBCs. Still they function very well. How?
Needed for genetic, generally for providing
uh,
genetic material, right?
we are I at least I lost your voice for a moment.
Yeah, so basically, DNA, sorry, yeah, DNA is needed just to provide for, what was I saying? The DNA is just needed for things like for giving genetic instructions. And I doubt an RBC needs any of that. So maybe that's why they can function without it.
Yeah, but still they have to perform certain functions. So how do they do that then?
So
Hmm?
they are just stuck in one cycle, no? Like, I mean, there's only one track they can move in. So
What
if
do
they
you mean
just,
by one track?
I mean, like, they can only move in the arteries and the veins. They can't go anywhere else, right? So I mean, like, उसमें move करेंगे तो काम खत्म. I mean,
नहीं, काम खत्म नहीं होता है, but how do they function? Even if they have to move there and they have to carry oxygen with hemoglobin, how do they do all that function? Or if they are not like functioning like a proper cell, why they are even called as cells otherwise?
so don't they have mitochondria? They have that, no?
They
RBC.
have no cell organelles.
No, like zero.
Zero. Anyone else would like to try? Janvi?
No.
Okay. Tanisha?
So I'm not sure, but I think it has something to do with their biconcave shape.
Hmm.
I mean, there must be a reason why they're shaped like that. One is to travel easily in the arteries,
Hmm.
but maybe it has something to do with easy oxygen exchange or something.
No, the biconcave helps with more surface area, no?
Yeah, so like more oxygen can be absorbed.
Yeah.
Yes, correct. So let me add to these things. So these are anucleate. The reason why they are anucleate, that means they don't have nucleus, is because they are just simple infrastructure of the cell. They are not like actual cell. They do not perform a lot of functions like how a normal cell perform. Like the normal cell can perform metabolism and energy generation and so on. That is not the case with the erythrocyte. They are simply the basic cytoskeleton, which is made up of proteins and whatever those lipids and stuff that is present. And that is the way they function, because their main function of the RBCs is to simply have lot of hemoglobin on its surface, and of course to represent antigen and so that blood group and things that we'll see later. But just because they are mere cytoskeletal material and they have to carry oxygen, so for carrying oxygen what they need is majorly hemoglobin, which is already prepared and synthesized. So they don't need any nucleus as such for any other function. So these are like very basic minimalistic cell function wise. These are those minimalistic cells, and they are RBCs, and that's why they don't need nucleus or any other things within those cells. So, and like I said, the hemoglobin is present all over around the RBCs, which can carry like lot of oxygen as well as carbon dioxide along with it. So one of the important fact is hemoglobin is 4 molecule complex. So there is heme molecule, and then there are 4 proteins at let's say the kind of around it, and these 4 proteins, they can simultaneously carry 4 oxygen together. So the heme, or the what we call iron or ferrous, not ferrous, I guess ferric, no, ferrous, yeah, so that is present at the center, and there are 4 protein molecules. These 4 protein molecules, they are like, and this whole thing is one complex, that is what we call as hemoglobin. So ultimately one hemoglobin molecule can carry 4 oxygen molecules at a time, and then there are many hemoglobin molecules within the RBCs as such, or that RBC skeleton. And same is the case with the carbon dioxide, because whenever there is no oxygen, the carbon dioxide will be higher in concentration and it will go and bind to hemoglobin, and that will be taken back to the lungs where the carbon dioxide is released. So that way, this oxygen and carbon dioxide, they are transported using hemoglobin. Now, these RBCs, they are produced in the red bone marrow by a process which is called as erythropoiesis. Erythropoiesis is the red blood cell synthesis process. So we already know that there are bone marrows present in almost most of the bones in our body. Like, of course, they are present in larger capacity with the longer bones. So for example, upper arm bone, that is humerus, or the thigh bone, what we call as femur. These are the longest bones of the body, and they have a good amount of bone marrow. And at the same time, your ribs or sternum, like all, even the small bone, the radius and ulna, they also have some sort of bone marrow present within them. And that way the erythropoiesis keeps on happening. From that is the synthesis of the RBCs keep on happening, and from there they are released into the blood system. So that is the synthesis process of RBCs. Now when this like during this erythropoiesis process, the stem cells, that is the original cells from which the RBCs they are being synthesized, they are erythroid precursor. Erythroid precursor as in they are precursors of this erythropoiesis process. Like we call reactants and products. Reactants are something else, and they change into their whatever shape or size or whatsoever it is, addition, deletion, and then it creates something else. So this is also something similar process. So there are some original type of cells which we call as the stem cells, and from these stem cells they differentiate over the time, and then they become like the erythrocytes, and that is what is mentioned here. These erythroid precursors or the stem cells as such, they undergo a series of morphological changes. Morphological means a shape-wise or physical changes to become mature erythrocytes. So they are derived from bone marrow through the process of erythropoiesis. They are and these stem cells, they are specifically called as erythropoietic stem cells, that is ESC in short. So that is the erythropoietic stem cells. From these erythropoietic stem cells, erythrocytes are developed after certain differentiation process. So that is the history of these RBCs. Where do they come from? Then the usual survival rate, that is the time duration from its time of being born to the death, is 100 to 120 days. That means each of the RBCs, they get replaced within your body after almost 3 months, right? So that is 100 to 120 days time frame. So within those many days they get replaced, and the new RBCs, they take part in the blood circulation. And now what happens to those RBCs which are kind of dead? So usually they are being broken down by the macrophages. So what happens is, these macrophages, which are one of the killer cells of the body, they actually kill the pathogen, but they can also kill the self cells or our own cells. So these macrophages, they will go and bind to RBCs, and they will literally tear it apart with the help of enzymes, and then the RBCs will be broken down, and then it will like further break down into the metabolic processes, and ultimately those metabolic waste that will be excreted out of the body. So after 120 days, these RBCs, they are recycled by macrophages of the spleen. Like these organs, they specifically help in the recycling process. Recycling, why it is called so? Because most of the cell breakdown product, that is RBC, they are broken down into proteins and other molecules, other biomolecules. These biomolecules or even those proteins, they can be reuptaken by the cells. So those cells in the spleen, liver or bone marrow, or even the lymph nodes, they will take up these broken products, and they will use it for synthesis of new RBCs. That way, that's why it is said as recycled. And this particular system is called as reticuloendothelial system. Again, you need not remember this name. That is just an additional like knowledge. So that is the lifespan of RBCs. Now, the gas exchange and the transport between lungs and blood and tissues, that is exchange of this oxygen and carbon dioxide, that happens. That is one of the major function of the RBCs. And another most important function is determining the blood group type. Now, again, like a kind of story, which is addition to this part in the syllabus, but it is not, this will not be asked to you, is that we have quite a lot of antigens which decides our blood group. Like commonly what we know is we have A blood group, B blood group, AB blood group, and O blood group. But I am sure that you have not heard of, as of now, there is a blood group called M or MN or N blood group. So that way there are several other types of blood group. Another thing that you have again would have heard is Rh positive and Rh negative. That is a rhesus monkey factor. So there are several such types. At least there are 40 to 50 antigens which are present on these
You
RBCs.
sorry to interrupt, you said rhesus monkey.
Yeah,
Hey, what? What is? Why does my blood have to relate it to the monkey?
because that rhesus monkey factor has been transported to us from those monkeys, and not directly from those monkeys, but let me say it in this way, that the factor or the Rh factor or the protein or antigen that is present in the human system, that was first identified in the rhesus monkey, and they also have the same factor, and that is why we have labeled it as rhesus monkey or rhesus factor. So that is just the because it was observed for the first time in the those species as well, apart from human. Okay, so yeah, so there are several such antigens which are present on the membranes of these red blood cells, and that decides quite a lot of blood groups. But most commonly ones we are in like we are using currently is your ABO blood group system. The reason being they are clinically significant. Others, they are not really clinically significant. That means they don't show much of cross reaction, or they don't show different variations as such, even if they are present or absent. So they don't matter much. And that is why we don't use any of the other, like I just mentioned that MN blood group system. We don't use any of those blood group system, but rather we use ABO blood group system. Now, how is this blood groups? How are these blood group represented on the RBCs? So the cell membrane of the erythrocyte is a lipid bilayer, right? And it contains two types of membrane proteins. So whole of that biconcave shape is made up of lipid bilayer, that is two layers of the lipid, and of course with the proteins there are type of membrane protein, that means they are located within those membranes of the biconcave shape, which are called as integral and peripheral. Integral membrane proteins, they will express the antigens of ABO blood groups, and the peripheral proteins, they impart the elasticity and strength to erythrocytes so that they can pass through the smallest capillary. So in short, the integral proteins or integral membrane protein which are present on the surface of these RBCs or within these lipid bilayer of these RBCs, they have this either ABO antigen or deciding factors for these blood groups, and the peripheral proteins, they allow the elasticity of the RBCs so they can squeeze through the smallest capillary. Again, additional piece of information here is, if you have A antigen on your RBCs, your blood group will be A. If you have B antigen on your RBCs, your blood group will be B. If you have both antigen, that is A as well as B, your blood group will be AB. And if you have no antigen on your surface, that will be called as O blood group. So that is the way we identify this different blood group system. And apart from this, like I said, we also follow that rhesus monkey factor blood group, that is Rh positive and Rh negative. So within A, you can have A positive and A negative. That means there will be antigen A and rhesus factor will be present. That antigen will be present. That will be Rh positive. And if it is A antigen without rhesus factor, then it will be A negative blood group, and so on. So that way the classification of the blood group is done. And these are the various functions or the functions of these membrane proteins which are present in the RBCs.
So,
Yes, any question here?
so there's this sorry for that. They say that universal receiver or something, AB blood group, they can receive any type of blood group, right?
Correct.
So, how do you how do you decide which like blood group can get which type of
Okay.
blood?
So for example, you just said that AB is the universal acceptor,
Yeah.
right? Now, O blood group does not have any antigen. That means it will not show any cross reactivity. So surely AB person can get O blood group, correct? Then A, for example, again the A blood group. In case of AB blood group, there is already A antigen. So if you are giving a blood from A individual, that is a blood group person having A blood group, that is still acceptable, because then it will again not show any cross reactivity. Similarly, if there is a person with B blood group and you transfer the blood from this individual with B blood group to AB blood group person, that will again not show any cross reactivity, because AB blood group already has that antigen, and that will be accepted as a self antigen. And that way that way the AB person with AB blood group will have will be able to accept all those possible blood groups
So
or
what so what happens if you give B blood group to an A blood group person? So how does the body deal with that?
so then there is something called as antibodies as well. So if I going if miss like if I may say this, it might make it little complicated, but yeah, you can hear it very carefully. So blood group A has A antigen and has antibodies for B. Blood group A, I'm repeating, blood group A has antigen A on the RBCs and has antibodies for B blood group or B antigen. So that means if you are giving the A blood group to, let's say, a person with B blood group, A blood group will have antibodies for B. So that will go and bind to that B antigen when you are transfusing the blood to that other person with the B blood group, and that will show severe inflammatory or allergic reaction, what is called as anaphylaxis. So
So
that
then
way,
yeah, so I got this. So then O will have A, B both, right? Because O doesn't have anything on it. A person with
A,
O a person with O blood group will not have anything on the RBCs, which means it will have A and B antigens, right? I mean
no,
antibodies. A and B both antibodies.
right.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
can your blood group change
Sorry,
over a
can?
period? Yeah. Can your blood group change over a period of time?
No, not possible. And again, the reason why I'm saying not possible, because this is genetic. If the blood group is changing, that means whole of your genetic makeup is also changing. Does that
So
happen?
we can edit genes now, right? Up to a certain extent.
But now you are talking of the gene editing in the germ cells, which are nothing but the gametes. We cannot do the gene editing in a human being in each and every cell. That is impossible.
Yeah, okay, yeah. That's practically impossible.
Means in certain organ, if you want to do certain action, that is very much possible. But otherwise, on an like larger basis, it is almost next to impossible.
Suppose
Okay, let me just stop sharing. We can take more questions so that, yeah.
what happens with surrogates? So, you know, does the child inherit some properties of the surrogate as well?
What do you mean by surrogate? You mean
Surrogate
mother.
mothers.
surrogate mother?
Yes.
Not really. So whenever the surrogate mother is chosen, they are also checked for the all those compatibility things. Like for example, blood group has to match. So based on the parents' blood group, the predictions they are done based on which gametes will fuse, what will be the possible blood group of the offspring or the child, and based on that what will be the like obviously we will know the blood group of the surrogate mother. That compatibility is always checked before doing any of these in vitro fertilization or test tube baby. But yes, it does have an effect, especially the cross reactivity is always checked.
So if I give wrong type of blood group to a guy, he can potentially die, right?
Yeah, so this is like, imagine the amount of RBCs that you have is in like, I guess, quite a few
Billions probably.
yeah, millions or so, right? Individually, all of them, they show cross reactivity because the blood is getting mixed, and you like have a higher chance of dying out of it.
Mhm.
Means obviously nowadays there are steroids and stuff which can totally suppress the immune reaction, but then that also has certain adverse effect, and also it will take quite a long time to neutralize all the antibodies which have been transfused into the person. So that way there is like still good chance that a person can die. Yes, Tanisha.
So I think O negative is universal donor,
Correct.
but O positive is not. So it can give blood to all the blood groups, but it can't. But it can only receive from O negative. So
Right.
how is that? How
Correct.
does that work?
How does that work, are you asking?
Yeah. So why is it like that? Like why can it donate to everyone but receive from only the same blood group?
Because of the presence of antigens, no? Because other blood groups, they like surely A, B, and AB, they have their own antigens. So they cannot get transfused into a person with O. So if that is being transferred, they will show immediate cross reactivity.
And O negative doesn't have any antigen, that's why it can donate to every other.
No, with O negative also it is the same. It is not different.
Yeah, I'm talking about O negative only.
So that is the same. O positive or O negative will be the same in terms of donating to all, but they cannot accept from all. And like O positive cannot go to O negative, or O negative cannot go to, no, O negative can go to positive to some extent. But then the O negative, no, sorry, O positive, that is RH positive person cannot donate a blood to RH negative person. That will again show cross reactivity for that RH factor. So that is again like complicated situation there.
So
Yes.
I don't like what. So you say O negative, O positive. So what is that positive and negative?
Positive and negative is for RH positive. That means that particular person has RBCs which has rhesus factor present. That is RH positive. And RH negative, that is we simply call it O negative or A negative or B negative or so on. So that way we call that particular individual as particular blood group negative. So that means the rhesus factor is absent in those individuals.
and most of the people have positive, right? So positive, there are more people with positive than with negative.
Yes, that is because that is the dominant phenotype.
So around 3 to 1 ratio.
I'm not sure. No, it cannot be 3 to 1 ratio. It is a non-Mendelian phenotype. Non-Mendelian, that means it does not follow the Mendelian cross phenotypic.
So Mendel's laws are somewhat wrong.
Yes.
Ah, I've never seen a scientist who's managed to get it right fully.
Yeah, there are quite a few. Just a moment, I'll open the gate for this. Okay. Yeah, so that way, that is what is called as non-Mendelian traits. And you see that in the skin color. Sometime we will talk about this. This is very interesting. Maybe in one of the class when you feel bored of talking of the regulars, we can talk of these things. That's actually currently I'm teaching to class 12th. So I have some, pictures as well to show it to you. That will be interesting discussion. Okay, let me stop here. The other class people, they have already started joining. If you have any more question, please keep it noted and then we can talk about them in the next class. And Anang, I must say,
Sir, I came in the morning.
I am very sorry. I totally
No problem.
I remembered it during the juice break that I missed your meeting.
It's fine.
So you let me know when you are free next and I shall.
Sir, tomorrow morning will work.
Tomorrow morning. Tomorrow is what? Thursday. Yeah. And I'm putting down in my calendar for sure. Yeah. Without,
Okay, thank you.
yes. Uh, okay. Other people should I kick out?